The global debt crisis, how central banks are bankrupting nations. The global economy is on a perilous trajectory, driven by an ever-expanding debt crisis that threatens to bankrupt nations and destabilize financial systems. In a recent interview with Tucker Carlson, Ray Dalio provided a sharp and insightful analysis of this issue, outlining the economic dangers posed by unrestrained monetary policies. At the heart of the problem lies the short-term thinking of central banks, particularly their reckless strategy of printing money to address immediate financial woes. This flawed approach has amplified economic catastrophes by fueling an exponential rise in interest rates, triggering a negative multiplier effect that disproportionately benefits a select few while undermining the backbone of economic growth, mid-sized industries. The role of central banks in the crisis. One of the primary culprits in the ongoing debt disaster is the Federal Reserve and other central banks, which have resorted to printing money as a quick fix for economic instability. While this strategy initially appears to provide relief, it ultimately exacerbates long-term economic vulnerabilities. By flooding the market with excess liquidity, central banks create artificial demand, temporarily propping up financial markets while neglecting the real economy. Instead of funding productive enterprises, this newly printed money largely ends up in the hands of institutional investors, large corporations, and financial elites, further widening the wealth gap and distorting economic fundamentals. The exponential growth of interest rates. As central banks inject massive amounts of liquidity into the economy, inflationary pressures rise, prompting policymakers to hike interest rates in an attempt to curb price surges. However, this reactionary measure often backfires, as the rapid increase in borrowing costs places unsustainable pressure on businesses and consumers alike. Small and mid-sized enterprises, which form the backbone of most economies, find themselves struggling to access credit as financial institutions prioritize lending to larger, more politically connected corporations. This misallocation of resources weakens economic resilience and stifles innovation, leading to lower productivity and slower growth. The negative multiplier effect. The consequences of reckless monetary policies extend far beyond inflation and rising interest rates. By directing capital to a select group of financial players instead of distributing it to industries that drive real economic growth, central banks inadvertently create a negative multiplier effect. Rather than stimulating broad-based economic development, their actions concentrate wealth and power in the hands of a few, while leaving mid-sized industries and working-class citizens to bear the brunt of economic downturns. This exacerbates social inequality, fuels political instability, and erodes public trust in financial institutions. The global implications of the debt crisis. What makes this crisis particularly alarming is its global reach. The United States may be at the forefront of the issue, but nations around the world face similar threats. From Europe to emerging markets, central banks have employed the same short-term strategies, leading to rising debt levels, inflation, and currency devaluation. As governments struggle to service their mounting obligations, many are forced to impose austerity measures, further squeezing the middle class and reducing overall economic dynamism. This vicious cycle of debt accumulation and crisis mismanagement mirrors the fate of an impending meteorite impact, an existential threat ignored until it is too late. It seems that we have passed the point of no return in the economic catastrophe. The world financial system is already bankrupt. The policies that governments and financial institutions are adopting are similar to giving oxygen to a dead patient to let them believe that he is still alive. A call for economic reform. The path forward requires a fundamental shift in economic policy. Instead of relying on unsustainable monetary expansion, policymakers must adopt long-term strategies that prioritize fiscal responsibility, encourage productive investments, and promote equitable access to capital. Governments should focus on supporting mid-sized industries, fostering innovation, and implementing structural reforms that enhance economic stability. Additionally, central banks must recalibrate their approach, ensuring that monetary policy serves the broader economy rather than a privileged financial elite. Conclusion. Ray Dalio's analysis serves as a stark warning. The unchecked expansion of debt and reckless monetary policies are pushing the global economy toward an unavoidable reckoning. The Federal Reserve and other central banks have set the stage for an economic catastrophe by failing to consider the long-term consequences of their actions. Without immediate reforms, the the world risks succumbing to an economic collapse that could rival historical financial crises. The time for action is now, before the metaphorical meteorite of economic disaster strikes with full force.